Thank you very much, please. Distinguished Prime Minister, former President Samuel Hines, former President Donald Ramotar, former President, Vice President and General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, Dr. Barry Jagdeo, members of the Cabinet, members of the disciplinary forces, the heads, members of the diplomatic community, most of all, most importantly, you, the people of Guyana, the true fans of Roger Luncheon, please give yourself a resounding round of applause for being here. I want to start by recognizing and thanking all those who took care of Dr. Luncheon, especially the nurses, the doctors, and the staff of the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, and I ask you please to give them a round of applause. Before I venture into some prepared notes, and very rarely I prepare notes, but on this occasion I had to prepare some notes. But it's difficult for me to speak knowing that I'm representing such a long legacy of presidents in the PPP who Roger served, and who Dr. Luncheon respected and regarded, and who I know regarded Dr. Luncheon tremendously, all of them. But you know, Dr. Luncheon and the British High Commissioner is here. There's a saying in the UK, loyalty to the throne. And Roger's motto was loyalty to the presidency. At every and any cost, his loyalty was first and foremost to the presidency. And that is why every president who he served, they were honored to have him as their chief servant. But Dr. Luncheon and I had many conversations, and I spoke to him about his loyalty. And I asked him once, and Shalene was there, what you value the most? And he said to me, loyalty. And I asked him what you don't like. He said, disloyalty. And when he said disloyalty, Shalene, you would know, immediately he mentioned two names. I'm tempted to name the names, but I wouldn't. He immediately mentioned two names. And those of us who spent almost every day of our life, including the General Secretary, and the leader of the opposition office, develop a very, very special bond. Many of the comrades here. It's in adversity that you see the true character of people. And as Bishop was reminding me last night, when they came to arrest him, they asked him his name, and he said, Roger F. Luncheon. So of course, it's Roger Forbes Luncheon. So, I was thinking if Roger was here, he would say, if I asked him, what should I say? He said, Banners, you try with that. Because that was his favorite go-to thing. There was a special connection between him and the General Secretary, and I know the GS did not speak about it. But every single time the General Secretary, who was then President, Vice President, leader of the opposition, embarked on an important decision, I know personally he consulted Roger. And they will speak deeply about the matter. And you would hear that, for some of you who may not know the ins and outs of how the PPP operate, there are deep, deep, deep discussions. There are some persons who are new to the cabinet. Onej is here, who came one night to State House, and the GS and myself were having a deep discussion. Oh, the PM was there too. And I look at Onej's face, and she was terrified. She thought these were enemies at war here. But that's how it is. We have very strong views, and you're encouraged to represent it. But at the end of it, you respect what the decision is. And that was what Roger was. He ensured that respect to that decision was upheld by all. He was a key figure in the team orientation of successive People's Progressive Party civic government. He was a great, great team player. So before I venture into some notes, I wanted to say that if we are to take away one word from Roger's life, Doc's life, take the word loyalty. It meant a lot to him. And respect, you know, I had, when I assumed the office of president, as president, some key appointments were made very quickly, including Roger Luncheon, a special advisor. I still have many notes, handwritten notes that he sent on every issue. And when he couldn't write, Shalene would call for him to speak to me. And when he didn't have the energy to do that, I would receive voice messages. And when he became very ill, Dr. Luncheon would call me and say, please excuse me from cabinet. That is the man. That is why every time he requested to see me, I left my office and I went to his office. And we have decided at the Defense Board that in his honor, the NISA building will be properly renamed to recognize his contribution to Guyana and the security of our country. Roger Luncheon was no ordinary mortal. He was a man for all seasons, a versatile individual with a soft, caring heart and a gift for human kindness. Blessed with a brilliant intellect, he was a consummate professional, dedicated to exceptional standards of public service. As a politician, he was a shrewd strategist and a paragon of loyalty to his party and government. He and the General Secretary, Dr. Jack, they believed in young people. And many young public servants, I'm not speaking about the party now, many young public servants were spotted and elevated because of what they demonstrated in their eyes. Many are here today. The State Planning Secretariat at one time had the greatest transformation and produced the most permanent secretaries. So they believed in young people because they had a strong, Roger Luncheon had a strong understanding of what the future requires. Doc, or HPS, as he was popularly known, had some peculiarities. On his desk was a dish full of rubber bands. He used rubber bands to bundle together stacks of files. But oddly, many of those rubber bands would end up as bangles around his wrist. Near his desk also was a credenza with a large sugar bowl. Those of you who know him will remember that sugar bowl. Roger would use a teaspoon to gorge himself occasionally on its contents. And depending on his mood, he will add sugar. So sometimes you will see him putting 5 spoons of sugar in a little bit of coffee. Tablespoon. And let me tell you something. When he load that sugar up, prepare for a long haul. There was also something about the relationship, and we came up very young, between him and the then president, the vice president now. You know when you're in no man's land, when Roger would say, bye, check with the president. And the president will tell you, check with Roger. Well, you're in no man's land. But they knew exactly what they were going to put at the bottom of the stack. Roger Luncheon was a retro man. One of his favorite tunes was Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting. I don't know, those who go to Saturday meetings will know that. Ashley, Anil. So as a young public servant then, I became the chief note taker at those meetings. And I'm happy I had that role. Today, many young people don't understand how important a role note taking is. Note taking allows you to write and understand every issue and every problem that the country is facing. And if you look at your job as simply taking the notes, you will not enjoy the benefit of note taking. And we will go there, and you would also know when the then president would attend the meeting, because Roger would lay out a plate of cheese and biscuit, so you know that the then president would be attending the meeting. So there were these things that became a norm and became part of who Roger was. He got very animated when the song Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting was played. He also loved oldies music and was a faithful fan of the Basil P. Show, which aired on Sunday nights. Not only he was a retro man, but also, as Clement would have you know, he had retro moves. He loved dancing. He loved socializing. Despite the high standing recognition and respect which he acquired, Dr. Luncheon remained a regular man. He was jocular and could crack and enjoy a good joke. When it came to tantalizing, he could give as good as he got. If you did not have thick skin, you couldn't be around him at all. Not many people knew that he was a decent athlete, but those who went very early on Saturday morning to those meetings would have to endure the history of how a good athlete he was. In his younger days, he practiced football with one of the top teams in Georgetown. At Queen's College, he participated in athletics and was an excellent hockey player. He also laid claim, maybe his brothers can tell us, to playing a good hand of dominoes. Dr. Roger was never bashful or vain, but the one thing he bragged about was his talent for cooking, and we had many debates about this, because I also believe I have some talent in cooking. He loved cook-up rice and would often tell us how he was going home to bubble a pot of cook-up or pepper pot with all the obstacles inside. As he would say in Guyana, he liked his belly. Now, Dr. Luncheon also was a very keen reader of Malcolm X's story and writing. And many of the young public servants would have received different aspects of Malcolm X's work. Dr. Luncheon eschewed wealth and fame. He was unswayed by the allure of affluence or celebrity status. He was a grassroots man, the core modest, humble, and frugal, as the Vice President said. He emerged out of the womb of the working class and never left it. His decision to stay clear of the glamour, which was often associated with the famous, wasn't an act of isolation. It was a conscious choice that he made to stand shoulder to shoulder with those whose life mirrored his working class origins. This is why his close circle of friends wasn't defined by social status or the size of their bank books. The unquestionable influence and authority which Dr. Luncheon wielded as head of the Presidential Secretariat and Cabinet Secretary did not cause him to be swell-headed, pompous, or pretentious. He was just dedicated and honored the trust that was placed upon him. Now, Dr. Luncheon wore many hats. The professional, Dr. Luncheon, the professional. I was very fortunate to be asked by the then president and Dr. Luncheon in a meeting after their consultation with then opposition leader Desmond Hoyt on the formation of the Depressed Community Needs Committee. This is part of our history, and I just told the former president and general secretary, and I always tell the vice president that we have to write these things. The Depressed Community Needs Committee was formed, and as a young person, I was asked again to be the resource person, a fancy name to be the note taker. And I remember Dr. Luncheon having almost half of the session with me on how important this task was and what is expected of this task. Also, remember that there are some names he would like to be associated with at this function. Saturday meetings had some old public servants that I'm very grateful for because they played a very key role in my own development. One, Clyde Raymond Rupchan, who was then the Chief Planning Officer. And these were all very close allies of the then president. And Kendall, I don't know how many people remember Kendall. Kendall was a permanent, I know Comrade Nocta would remember him. He was a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Local Government. And they were fixtures at the early Saturday meetings that discussed every single thing in government. And in those days, because resources were so difficult to get and to find, you had to have priorities. And you had to manage the priorities so well to ensure everything was within budget because there wasn't anything available for variation. And those were the difficult days that Dr. Luncheon managed the day-to-day grinding. Dr. Luncheon loved his country dearly. The late Director of Protocol, Vic Prasad, would often relate how when Doc was a student and later practicing doctor in the United States, that Doc would be a regular visitor to the Guyana Embassy in Washington, where he, Dr. Luncheon, would pore over the Guyana newspapers. Even then, he took a keen interest in the affairs of his country. And despite the difficulties in Guyana at the time, he returned home to serve the people. He was a top-tier doctor, as countless professionals and patients would attest. And he was immensely popular as a doctor. When he walked through the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, he was hailed by all, from the cleaners to the consultants. Such was the measure of respect for him. It was no secret that his political rivals sought him out for treatment. He never denied or turned them away. The late Rabbi Washington of the House of Israel, who was no friend of the PPP, expressed admiration for the professional manner in which Dr. Luncheon attended to him, despite him being on opposite sides of the political divide. Rabbi credited Luncheon with saving his life. That was the man we celebrate. That was the humanness of the man we celebrate. Dr. Luncheon brought the practice of scientific precision to his work within the government. His meticulous attention to detail and accuracy became hallmarks for his reports. He was rigorous in his work. Dr. Luncheon's work ethic was a gold standard of public service. A workhorse, he labored from dawn until late at night at his desk in the service of his government and the people of Guyana. No one worked harder than Dr. Luncheon in the public service. If ever there was someone who stood as a model of public service, it has to be Dr. Forbes Luncheon, Roger Forbes Luncheon. Not only was he hardworking, but he was decent. Dr. Luncheon was hugely respectful to those who worked with him. He was cool and never looked fazed, but trust me, you can experience his strong hand, especially if you run afoul with the presidency. You can experience very strong treatment if you run afoul with the policy laid out by the cabinet and the presidency. You will see a very cool character become very, very strong and forceful in what he needs to tell you. Dr. Luncheon was confident in his skin and supremely confident in his ability to handle any circumstance. The ease with which he worked with all persons, regardless of their politics or history, earned him much admiration and respect. In the office of the president, he was beyond pettiness and spite, and his actions were devoid of malice and vindictiveness. And this is a nature of the PPP civic government. You know, when we came back into office in 2020, our first task was to rebuild Guyana. Our first task was to rebuild Guyana. One of the most dishonorable things this country, well, not the country, any government did was to hunt Roger Luncheon down, a man of such character and decency. And you know, at 4 in the morning when they came to arrest me, I went back to the leader of the opposition office and the GS. The leader of the opposition was there in Luncheon. And Luncheon laughed and said, well, boy, we have something in common now. So, and we laughed it off. Because we were confident. And we knew the rationale behind what they were doing. And the vindictiveness. But that did not shape who we are in government. Who we are in government, as Dr. Luncheon would want me to say, is people who serve our country and its people. When Dr. Luncheon left the office of the president in 2015, a lot of persons cried. Not for himself, but for the many staff members and colleagues he was going to miss. Dr. Luncheon, I know, shed many tears when he left. All those who supported him during his 23 years, Ms. Ford and the entire team, Shalini, I want to recognize all of you for the support you give him. The tables were turned, however, in 2020 when he returned with his trademark wicked smile to happily reunite with his former workmates. I'm so glad that he had the satisfaction of seeing the People's Progressive Party civic return to office, and for him to make his final salvo in public service. Please give him a round of applause. As the General Secretary said, the last few years were difficult for Dr. Luncheon. His health faded. His eyesight disappeared. Yet, this indomitable spirit could not be defeated. A true measure of the man's mettle was that he chose to answer the call to service once more, returning to the government to share his vast reservoir of knowledge and unparalleled expertise. Dr. Luncheon was first, I want to speak to him a bit now about as a politician. Dr. Luncheon was first attracted to the People's Progressive Party because of Cheddi Jagan and his, Luncheon's ideology, affinity to the working class. Even as a doctor, he was active in pursuing the interests of the working class. Many of you may not know, but he dabbled in trade unionism as part of his commitment to the working class. In 1984, whilst addressing the 38th Delegates Conference of NACI at the Albion Sports Complex Stadium, Dr. Luncheon said, "It was the working class that is vested with the responsibility for social transformation." He urged that the working class be involved in the political life of the nation. In decrying the hardships being then faced by the country's workers, he called for working class unity, noting that the basis for such unity is class considerations. In that regard, he asserted that there was a working class consciousness that maintains the integrity and credibility of the trade union movement. The working class consciousness. That is why I have dedicated myself to meet directly with the workers of the country. because I want to be associated and affiliated, and I want this government to be associated and affiliated with the consciousness of the workers. And that is why I said our consultation will be with the workers directly. This was an early indication of his working class sympathies, and more than explains his association with the People's Progressive Party, a party of the working class. Dr. Luncheon was one of the leaders of the PPP. Within the party, he wasn't an executive member. He was an icon and a most trusted, loyal, dependable leader. When it came to debates within the party, he was never thin-skinned. Regardless of his personal position on an issue, Roger was uncompromising in his adherence to collective responsibility. He would never wash the party linens in the public. Such was his commitment to party unity. At the national level, Dr. Luncheon was our go-to person in times of crisis, and he never failed us, either through his advice or actions. For decades, he served as a lighthouse of the government, directing us to safe and secure harbors. Many an occasion, he pulled our nation back from the precipice. He was nicknamed the gatekeeper. Yes, that was his nickname, the gatekeeper. But he could also be deemed the defender of the faith. On the campaign trail, he was electrifying. One of the great honor I had was to be asked by the party to chair the Kitty Rally, one that is known as a trademark of Dr. Luncheon. He was the celebrity at Kitty Rally, and he made sure the crowd knew that he was a celebrity. And he chaired those rally as long as he could. He radiated a contagious vitality. He captivated the crowds. On the platform, he was no longer the man who was measured and careful in his choice of words. He was transformed into an effusive force that ignited fervor and energized the party's base. Roger's words on the platform were masterclass in political rhetoric, education, and engagement. He was quick on the feet. He injected a vibrant dose of entertainment in his oratory skills, while his sharp, teasing banter and playful jests never veered towards impropriety. We'll dearly miss all of that. Farewell, comrade. Dr. Luncheon's death marks the end of an era for our government and party. He was a constant staple in the PPP civic and its governments since 1992. And I want to say too, in opposition between 2015 to 2020, he was the leader of the opposition office every day, and again secured himself a trusted office and heir of the leader of the opposition at that office. Dr. Luncheon's death marks the end of an era of our government and party. He was a constant staple in the PPC and his governments since 1992. His passing has left a void in our party's leadership, a yearning void in our government and in public administration. I've lost a dear friend, a comrade and confidant. So too did all the leaders and many here. He was more than a colleague to me. He was a mentor. I relied upon and trusted his wise and considerate counsel. I appreciated the time and effort he invested in nurturing my political career. And on behalf of all the young public servants at that time, and all the young professionals who were appointed to the cabinet, brought into the party, into leadership. On behalf of all of them, I want to thank Dr. Luncheon for what he instilled in us. Today, we bid goodbye to our brother and comrade. We say thank you for your service to the country, government, and party. But most of all, thank you for the example, the living example you left us. No words can match the power of example. And Dr. Luncheon's example was peerless and beyond reproach. The sound of his shuffling steps will no longer be heard. The echoes of his familiar "What happened" banners have gone silent. Roger Luncheon, our beloved comrade, is no more. Many a comrade will rise in our party. But in my humble view, none can replace him. He was special. He was unique. He is irreplaceable. He was the one and only, the incomparable Roger Luncheon. There can never be another, because a star only pitches once. How fortunate we are to have had him for so many years in our orbit. Today, we lay him to rest with honors befitting of a hero and a legend. Today, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana acclaims Dr. Roger Forbes Luncheon as being among the most illustrious sons it has ever borne. Within the hallowed annals of our nation's history, his name is etched in golden letters, a testament to his enduring, unwavering, and selfless contribution to our nation and its people. Go with all our love, Doc. Go with all our love, Roger. Go with all our love, HPS. Your labors are complete. Job well done. Your transition will be resplendent. Glory and grace await you in your new abode. Rest in eternal splendor, Roger. I thank you.